Bienvenidos al club. Muy buenas tardes, ¿cómo estáis? Aquí estamos de vuelta, ya sabéis, en un episodio especial. Ya sabéis que además de los capítulos semanales, analizando y con las secciones de Dani Gea y Sergio Jimón, además de NBAdictos a las 12 repasando la jornada de la NBA, de vez en cuando os traemos capítulos especiales. Hoy va a ser uno de esos capítulos, una entrevista en inglés con el gran Seth Partnow. Ya sabéis, hoy haremos la entrevista en inglés, estos días la traduciré, la doblaré y posiblemente el sábado o el domingo la tendréis doblada en castellano. Aquí comienza el capítulo 365 de NBAdictos. Y es que hoy tenemos con nosotros al gran Seth Partnow. Seth Partnow, NBA analyst at The Athletic, former director of basketball research of the Milwaukee Bucks. You just published your first book, The Mid-Range Theory. It's an excellent excuse to bring you here to NBAdictos. Welcome, good afternoon, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I love your intro. That is popping.
The song is from Carlos Bayona, the brother of Juan Antonio Bayona, the film director, and they have the announcer of the Chicago Bulls because he is a diehard Bulls fan, and is Jordan in the '98 finals. he didn't that treat. Seth, I have to confess that I know you from The Athletic. Please, everybody, subscribe to The Athletic. It's the best spent money. I really enjoyed your analysis, and then I started following you in Twitter. You are a must follow in Twitter. But it wasn't until a couple of months ago that I realized that you worked for the Bucks. I know I am a disaster. How it was that path from being an executive to be an MBA analyst at the media?
Well, it's sort of almost returning to roots. I got my start in basketball writing analysis. I essentially was blogging and writing, and eventually kind of larger websites, and that gave me the platform to kind of get noticed by teams. And while it was happening, I had interviews, conversations with a number of different teams over a couple of years, and early 2016, just kind of a position came together that the Bucks offered me. So I moved my family to Milwaukee and was there for 3 years, and 3 years and a bit, and still live in Milwaukee. But at a certain point, professional, like working for a professional sports team is hard from a lifestyle standpoint, hard from a family standpoint. And it's largely because I felt like I was missing too much of like my kids growing up. I decided to shift a little and move back to kind of the media space. And in addition to that kind of lifestyle factors, also the focus on what you can sort of research is very different. Um, Working for a team, you're not always focused on learning for its own sake. It's all driven by competitive advantage. And that's from a research standpoint that I don't want to say it stifles creativity, but it is a little bit more limited. Whereas in the media space, anytime I kind of I wonder, I can explore it and not feel like I am falling behind if I don't find anything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I completely get it. We'll come back to your time in the Bucks later, but just 2 days ago, your first book was published, The Mid-Range Theory. What can we find in it?
It's a chapter by chapter approach to trying to both to demystify analytics, not make it clear that it's not something different than basketball. It's just basketball through a slightly different lens. Kind of explain how analytics has come into basketball, specifically the NBA, how it's affected the game, and how it kind of interacts with some other kind of factors, other streams, other developments, whether rule changes or strategic developments or changing player skill sets to sort of help form the NBA game that we see today.
Mhm. Here we have in Amazon the mid-range theory. You have the Kindle version in which have I don't know how to say muestra. You can read a couple of chapters in Amazon, and also with the hard uh, covers. In it's I'm waiting for mine. I already bought it, but it doesn't
Well, thank
arrive
you. Thank you. I appreciate
yet.
it.
Um, I read the chapter talking about Russell Westbrook and the triple doubles that you published in the Athletic. Um, I'm glad that you touched that that issue because mm, people say that I am a little bit Russell Westbrook hater, but I'm not that hater. I don't want him in my team. I think that he's a gorgeous athlete that plays individually a sport that it's played in teams. Um, Also, the last years, if we go to the chart of more triple doubles, we can see that the guys from the last 10 years are standing up.
Yeah.
Uh, it's, it's cheaper now to make triple doubles than it was before.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's a it's a term that I think I coined. It's heliocentrism, in that a team's offense is revolving around the sun, the one star, and you see so many more teams, their offense just putting the ball in one player's hands, and it's not just Russell Westbrook. It's James Harden, obviously. It's Luka Doncic. It's Trey Young. It's a number of players. Even like the Bucks to some degree with Giannis.
Mhm.
Probably like a player of his type in 10 years ago would handle the ball just far less than he does now. So that, like, naturally, the one player having the ball more, that gives that player like more control over the game, gives them more chances to get assists. um Oftentimes that player is then used in more of a kind of a rover or perhaps resting role on defense, which then allows them to maybe get a few more rebounds because they're not chasing all around the perimeter. So the ball just can maybe fall in their lap a few more times. So I think that's, and on top of that, just the pace of play has increased. So there's just kind of more stats to go around. So yeah, the triple double is a little bit, as you say, cheaper than it was, how many years ago. If I may, you talked about not wanting Russell Westbrook on your team.
Mhm.
No, he's actually he is kind of a demonstration of a really interesting aspect of when you get into basketball from a statistical sense. You understand how important context is, how the numbers a player accumulates, their kind of value, what they mean about the player, depends very much on circumstance. And that sort of idea goes across all of basketball. So if you're a team that you won 30 games last year, if you went 30-52 last year, Russell Westbrook is a great player to add to your team,
Mhm.
because his drive, his ball dominance, his the
He's a button raiser.
yes, exactly. He's a floor raiser. But
Yeah.
if you're a team that's already at 45 wins, he's not the guy. He's not at least at this point in his career, is not a great player to take you to 60.
Yeah.
And that's, so do you want him on your team? It like, for the vast majority of players, like, would you rather have this guy or that guy? It depends. Like,
Yeah.
there's some players who are clearly better, but like in many circumstances, between two players who are close, who do you prefer? it depends. What else? What are we trying to do? Who else do we have? So he's almost a perfect example of that.
And the guys are here in the chat on Twitch, and Emishing says triple double is on Black Friday sales. There is a sentence you say in that chapter from Marilyn Strathern. I don't know if I said it right. And that says, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
That's a concept known as Goodhart's law. It's an economics concept. It's basically saying that the sporting equivalent, and I'm not sure what the Spanish idiom for it would be, but it's don't play the drill. You can always you can in it, if you're at practice and the drill is sort of a simplified version of part of the game, you can always win the drill by cheating the drill, but you're not getting anything out of that. And I think that applies to sports statistics at writ large. The statistics a player generates are, the output of that player's what that player contributes in the game. They're not necessarily, if you're trying to win the game, and that's all you're trying to do, certain things will happen as you're just playing basketball naturally. The choices you're making, whether you're passing, you're shooting, you're taking a charge, what have you. And in that instance, the statistics you accumulate will reflect to a large degree like your impact. Now, if you change that, and it's like I'm not playing necessarily to win the game. I'm playing because I want to score as many points as possible.
Yeah.
You're almost not playing the same game anymore. And so the statistics mean, like, your scoring numbers mean a different thing because you've kind of gone outside the intended goal of trying to help your team, maximize winning chances. And so that's sort of what that economic concept really means in sports to me is that, you can look at these stats as an indicator, but as soon as you start trying to get these stats, it becomes very dangerous because they don't mean the same thing when that's what you're trying to do, instead of that just sort of being something you observe.
Context matters.
Yes.
Because, for example, it's not the same making 20 points in the second unit against the second unit of the rival than make 20 points being from the starting lineup.
Exactly. There's so many examples where a player in a different role does just different things because the environment in which they're playing is different, and that applies across different like forms of basketball. I mean, I think there's a number of players you can see they are completely different players in kind of FIBA competition than they are in NBA competition. In under FIBA rules, Rudy Gobert might be a top 3 player in the world. Spanish national team Ricky Rubio and Rubio's long been one of my favorite players. So I'm really loving that we're getting to see closer to that version of him for the Cleveland Cavaliers this year. But because he's in a different role for the Spanish national team than he's really ever been for an NBA team, he does different things. And then, knowing he's going to do those different things, he plays differently. And so his statistics then become different as well.
Also, Carmelo Anthony. He's a huge top. I think that he's the best NBA player under FIBA rules ever, but and he wasn't so great in the NBA.
But I would still say Kevin Durant, but that's but no. But in the kind of the funny thing with like this year with the Lakers is almost the first time that we're seeing like, and it's unfortunately it's so far past his physical prime. We're seeing like that style of play from Carmelo in the NBA, where he's really one of the great shooters of all time, who's also just ended up having the ball in his hands a lot. But if he had just been like, a shooter scorer on a team with other stars, like what would his career have looked like? It's sort of a what if.
There is an anecdote that I like you to tell about the high five and the stats of the high five, because it was very funny for me reading that.
Yeah, no, so that's I think that's a perfect example of Goodhart's law, which we talked earlier. There's studies that come out, all the time, like psychology studies, um, looking and seeing like, okay, what are good indications of team play, and is it mean success and stuff like that. And usually, what it comes up with is, hey, teams that exhibit good team uplifting behavior, like they have a lot of like high fives and other sort of like physical encouragement of teammates. And so it's
Mm.
like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like a team that's playing together, they high five a lot, everything's good. So then what happens is like some coach thinks, well, if the high fives are what makes us win, we're going to high five all the time. And so they encourage high fives and they say, we're going to be counting your high fives. And now, well, crap, they're counting my high fives, high five, high five, high five. And all of a sudden those aren't like, it's not a high five where we just made a great play. It's plus one, plus one, plus one. And that's a very different thing, just in terms of like, what kind of, think about it, what kind of psychological benefit are you if I high five you and I'm high fiving you because the coach is watching with the clipboard? Meh.
And there,
You
there
know,
is there is not an indicator anymore.
yeah, exactly. It becomes worthless as an indicator because you've opened the present. You've you've looked inside the box and now it's well, no more. It's not a surprise anymore.
Mhm. Some of the most known advanced stats guy in the NBA is Daryl Morey, now in the Philadelphia 76ers, before in the Rockets. Um, we saw that ultra small ball in the Rockets. I was reading. I don't know if it was yesterday or today. A quote from you that say, "I hate analytics." Maybe we have to mix several things, not basing everything on analytics.
That's actually the first line of the book, and that's a little tongue in cheek. It's as much the term has become so loaded
Yeah.
that it's like, well, and I do analytics. It's like, ah, what do you know? Like, it's like I played basketball too. It's not just that I haven't. It's not like I've learned the game like through equations. I learned the game by playing basketball, and then found a way to relate kind of the statistics back to it in a way that helped me better understand what was going on. Um, and so just like the terminology of analytics has become, because it's been such like a hot button,
Mm.
not just in basketball, but any number of sports. Obviously it's in soccer, football, it's becoming a bigger thing as well. And there are people who are fearful of it, in part because they're seeing it as like something different. It's threatening both because it's new, but it's also kind of, well, that's not the sport.
like
That's
like
some stuff
taking
on a
the
computer.
nature of the sport.
Yeah. And it's like, no, it's understanding if done well, done poorly, absolutely. Done well, it's just better understanding the nature of the sport. Like the thing you learn very early if you're doing kind of sports analytics, and I have to use the term because we don't have a better one. One of the things you learn early is that um the the kind of the old heads, the traditional knowledge, that's pretty good. If there you kind of, a lot of times in public discussion, it seems like, if you were to, rate the understanding of like the coach or the GM or whoever of the sport, it's like, oh, they're at about a 50. And really you get into it, it's like, no, they're right 90% of the time. 80, maybe, okay, they think they're right 90% of the time. They're probably actually right 80% of the time. And then there's that 10% in the middle where we can kind of discuss and maybe tweak a little bit and help improve. But like so many of like the basic kind of basketball truisms, yeah, you study them and it's like, that's right. That's right. That's also right. You get down to the Dean Oliver's 4 factors, which are like the basis of basketball analytics. It's effective field goal percentage, turnover rate, defensive rebound percentage, and free throw rate. Okay, if I wanted to translate that, that would be take and make good shots. Don't let the opponent do the same. Take care of the ball. Don't foul. Finish your defensive possessions with rebounds. Like that's
It's what you say to a boy of 6 years old when he starts playing basketball.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's just basketball. And yeah, we've described it in a different way, and we're better, like more precisely and better calculating how well you do at those things. But that's just basketball. And I hope that that's part of what I'm able to do in the book is really illustrate how they're the same thing. Maybe we just use slightly different language.
Because this book is not like advanced analytics for dummies, but it's not die-hard fans analytics. It's something in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's probably if for someone who knows very little about basketball or the NBA, there might be a little bit of a wait, who is he talking about? But for basketball fans, I tried to make it as understandable as possible. I think I have an appendix at the end, which is a little bit of basketball analytics for dummies. But if in the body of the book, I think there's two equations. So I wasn't trying to do math. I wasn't trying to do statistics. I was trying to sort of explain what these things mean. Not kind of, you don't need to know to really gain the benefits of analytics. You don't need to know how to do a ridge regression. You don't but you do kind of need to understand basic at a basic level what an adjusted plus minus model is doing. And I think we can explain that pretty easily. It's like, hey, okay, we have plus minus, but we know the reasons it's wrong. Like, well, who you're playing with, who you're playing against. Well, we have statistical and mathematical techniques to control for that. And that's what we're doing. That's what these models do. It's like, okay, like, I don't think that's that's a hard concept to understand. Do you need to know how that works to understand kind of what that means? I think you need to maybe know how it works enough to know that it's not, BS. But beyond that, you don't need to you don't need to perform it.
I treat advanced stats like I treat my car. I know the basics of why when I turn the key the car moves, but I don't know how the engine works.
But your experience has told you that it does. So it's like, good. I turn it, it works, we go.
I trust engineers, so
Yeah.
I trust you guys with advanced stats. We have some people here in the chat. Sorry for not reading that a lot because if I have to translate from Spanish to English to I can die here. But I have some question from Simulatio NBA. And then he's died hard advanced stats, and he asked me some question for you. The first of all is how percentage of your time you will spend at the time of focusing on scouting, looking at the data or looking at the videos.
It's a good question. I was probably 70-30 data versus video. I did enjoy. I didn't get to do it. I only got to do it semi regularly. Actually, go out on the road and scout games in person. It's that there are certain things that actually being in person really actually is very helpful for. You get a much better sense of like a true size of a player. TV has a way of sort of flattening players out. So it's like, oh, that guy's actually much more muscular than or he's much skinnier than he looks on TV, or he's actually not as he doesn't have quite the length that I thought. And that's useful information. But you do have to look at the video to understand what's going on. There was I think it was, I'm trying to remember what year it was. It must have been the 2017-18 season. Looking, in one of our like mid-season models, there was this freshman point guard from a small school named Demetrius Morant, who was like blowing up our model, and I was like, who, what? And it's John Morant, and
Yeah.
so so it's like, let me watch this guy, and then oh, it's like just like his athleticism explodes off the screen. And but that's when something weird comes up unexpected comes up in your analysis, you do have to go back to the source, because this is a lesson that I try to pass on to people who are getting into doing sports analytics, basketball analytics, is when you come up with a surprising result, you don't run out and say, everything is wrong. It's like, wait, your first thought should be, what did I do wrong? Did I do something wrong in setting up this model, or is there a sign reversed in the equation?
Why I have this
Yeah.
result?
Yeah, and then and so that your first is like, let me make sure. And in many things, for especially like scouting of college players, like you do have to go back to the video, because there are certain player types who do very well in like a draft projection, but then from a qualitative standpoint, that's not going to work. There's like the excellent like 6'4" mid-major power forward who's not really a great outside shooter. Like that's a guy who, because he's strong and knows how to play, is going to have a really nice career in Europe and is going to dominate college competition, but it's just not going to work in the NBA. Maybe he's going to go overseas and learn how to shoot and come back and be PJ Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, like, we've heard of PJ Tucker, but how many, there was a guy who played for Stony Brook right around that time named Jameel Warney, who's had some, success on some international teams and stuff like that. But you look at him, you can tell pretty quickly that the way he is being successful is not something that would translate to the NBA game. So you do have to, check yourself on that and not just say, well, my model says this guy's the best guy, and that's it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you do present your model sort of unannotated, but you also, that's not your, the results of my model were not this is the analytics department draft board, if that makes sense. Like, you do have to, you do have to do some qualitative analysis. You do have to think. Like, it's a dereliction of duty to just say, well, the model says, so I don't have to think anymore. It's like, no, you're here to not just set up the model, but interpret the results. And there are things that are happening that aren't in the model.
Yeah.
So again, getting back to actually watching basketball is, massively important for that.
Mm-hmm. Soundgarden says, how do you value the mental strength in your model? That's why also you watch the video and watch the guys live.
So there are a couple different approaches to this. One is that you do like, as part of a scouting process, a team does do like background and psychological and stuff like that on a player, and you could try to use that data and translate it into something that can go into a model and build that into a model. I kind of more prefer to leave that as something separate. Like, you're already when you're going to, in a draft situation, for example, or this holds true for free agency or a trade, or even just doing a contract negotiation. If you're the person who's making the decision on how to do this, there's 10 different kinds of information you're taking in. And so you're taking in medical, you're taking in salary cap, your scouts are talking, the analytics and statistics are weighing in, your coaching staff might have thoughts on the player, people who've played with him or against him before, the players who played with him or against him before. One of the kind of I might be giving secrets away here, but like the training staff that travels with the team, and the security staff that's training with the team, something, everyone kind of before the game during warm-ups, they're kind of, they're seeing the guys from the other team and like, hey, how you doing? And talking, and you talk and as it comes up, you hear things about players around the league, and so that those kind of that kind of information about players who's doing what that goes in, and to
Mhm.
build all of that into a formal model,
Yeah.
it's tough but to build that to kind of build to integrate all of that into a decision process, that's very difficult. But that's the job of like a general manager, of a decision maker, is to take all these different streams and collate them together into, okay, these are the important bits of information. This is why I think this player is a better bet than this player.
And also
Um,
you have your experience and your guts.
I mean, the intuition part is hard. I don't particularly, because it's more that you have a process that you go through,
Mhm.
that you do what you can to remove like your biases as much as
Mhm.
possible, and make sure you're considering, you're weighing every piece of information and how you want to set that up. Like there's no right answer to that. There's a lot of wrong answers, but there's
Mhm.
no one right answer to how to do that. So I don't think it's necessarily my gut says. It's like my evaluation of all these different things, of which my experience in lifetime of observations in the sport of basketball certainly plays in. Like
Yeah.
my sort of mental model of what's important in basketball obviously makes a great deal of importance, but
What
you're
what I
still,
mean is
yeah,
when you value a player, you have all the things that we are talking about,
yeah.
and then there is maybe like 100 or one part of a million that you said, and I think there is something in me that says, okay, and I'm right.
I and that's and that can work as long as you are, after the fact, are honest with yourself about, what you got right and wrong in those ways. Like,
Mhm.
like a scout who is like, I think it's possible that a very good scout we could be good at, like, from observation, like picking out players who had better like competitive fire than others.
Yeah.
Um, Especially if that, okay, if I've done this for 30 years, I've seen 1,500 players. I've thought that 70 of them had, great competitive fire. How many of those guys turned out to be that way in the NBA? For the ones who didn't, why was I wrong? And sort of, if you kind of almost go through that process, and so you're constantly updating your own sort of intuition, then I think that's valuable. If it's just something like, I think he's got great competitive fire, and
Mhm.
then the guy doesn't, and then next year you're like, that guy has great competitive. It's like you're not giving a forecast that's based on anything.
Mhm. Now I'm going to ask you a question. I have to confess, I don't know what I'm going to read right now. I don't
Okay.
understand a single word. So
Okay.
I don't know if I'm going to say it right or not.
Okay.
Simulatio wants to know which all-on-one hybrid production and impact is more useful for you. EPM, DPM, RIPM, PIMP, LeBron or Raptor. I don't know what I said.
These are a number of different these are a number of different kind of one number value models for players, and I think they're all useful. I tend to, just for ease of use, I think I prefer EPM. I actually frankly tend to prefer just almost more of a just a kind of more vanilla RAPM, which is just sort of basic. Um, all of these models kind of add some things on top of, an adjusted plus minus model to give better predictive to outputs, um, which is helpful in some ways, but in other ways, to my mind, if when they're wrong, it's hard to tell why, because you're not exactly sure
Mhm.
what's causing them to view a player a certain way.
Mhm.
So I prefer the one that's very, just as a starting point for analysis, very like, okay, when this player was on the floor, controlling for who he was with and against, what happened? And then I can, okay, well, he was playing out of position, or there's some well-known reasons why that number might be, off, and you can kind of mentally adjust for those. But I think all of like basically any of the models that were listed have things that recommend them. Something like the other one is even though it's not available readily publicly anymore because the inventor of it works for the Wizards now, is PIPM, player impact plus minus. That's one that I think is very useful because it works reasonably well off of a much smaller sample. So you can actually look at it for, say, the playoffs, which is
Mhm.
um, i- it's analyzing the playoffs is problematic in other ways, but at least that's something that kind of works. So those are the two that I would say that I probably use myself the most. DPM, Costa Medvedovsky is a friend of mine who's the creator of that. I'm very intrigued by that. Um, it's I It hasn't been around long enough for me to be completely comfortable. And this isn't saying I don't think it works. It's just I don't know observationally how it works, how it reacts to certain situations well enough to know how much to trust it. But I think it's extremely interesting and
Mhm.
um, very interested to see how its predictions prove out to have been over time. So that it's a model that um, so far seems to have done a pretty good job of projecting which players will improve and at kind of what rate. It was like the first thing that said, you know what, Jamal Murray's going to be really good in not very long. And then, before he injured himself last year, he had been, probably one of the top 25 players in the league over the last year.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm. But
I think
if
that's a
we see how he jumps in in the bench when his team scores, I
yeah.
think he will come back stronger.
I hope so. I really enjoyed the couple weeks after the Nuggets traded for Aaron Gordon last year before he got hurt. They were the best team in the league last
Yeah.
year, and so I was very sad when he injured himself.
I enjoy a lot the low post, the Sack Low podcast, and in that time he said immediately, "There are my favorites. This team is going to
Yep.
rock it," and it was a shame in the Murray
Yeah.
injury. I want to know why the mid range theory. Why that name for the book?
So there's two reasons. One is obviously one of the biggest topics that if you're doing a basketball analytics book, you have to talk about is the rise of the three pointer.
Yeah.
So the rise of the three pointer is also talking about sort of the decline of the mid range jumper.
Hmm.
Um, the title itself is actually one of my favorite albums growing up was The Low End Theory by Tribe Called Quest. And actually back in the day when we were starting the blog that became a Nylon Calculus,
Hmm.
um, the second place name that I came up with for that blog was the mid-range theory. And so I've always had that in my back pocket. If I knew I'll use this someday. And then when I was writing a book, I was like, the mid-range theory, I finally get to use it. So that's where the title comes from. So it's a little bit of a play on words.
Yeah, I get it because my nickname Planetario is not my surname, and is the name that I would like to put it in a bar that I never gonna have. So and I became in I start in the radio, I start making music programs and said, okay, Planetario, planetary. It's like a musical observatory. That's it. So when I get the social media, it's Manu Planetario. So I perfectly get it. We have to talk, obviously, about the 3 point shooting. And talking about 3 point shooting, we have to talk about the Warriors. But maybe I get surprised, some of our listeners, because I'm not asking you about the 3 point shooting itself, but I love the analysis you did about the defense of the Golden State Warriors the other day on Twitter. Um, because you said that sometimes we confuse uh, defending well with defending hard, or running a lot, or going to the opponent. And these Golden State Warriors are such great defenders, number one in defense right now, because they are so well positioned in the field.
Absolutely, and I think this is a place where you can make a pretty easy football analogy. Like so the famous Paolo Maldini quote, like
Yeah,
if I have to make a tackle, I've made a mistake.
yeah,
And that's like you can play good defense without, if you're always in a situation where your defense is sprinting around, you have to ask why you've put yourself in a position for everyone to be sprinting around. Now, there are teams, a counterexample would be a team like the Raptors, who intentionally play a style where they are using their length and athleticism to
yeah.
kind of run and jump a lot. And so that's sort of a special case. But
Mhm.
if you're playing kind of more base defense, what the Warriors are doing right now is everyone is so attuned to what they're supposed to be doing, so good at anticipating where the ball is going to go, where the offensive players are going to go, that they're
And
when it's time for them to be in a spot, they're not running to that spot, they're in that spot.
yeah, and if not, they have Draymond.
Yeah, yeah, that helps too. It does. That also helps. But I think that like Draymond gets is rightfully getting a lot of credit for it. But I think that's really selling short how locked in everyone on that team is in terms of just being anticipating where to be. I think the way I put it in kind of in the summation of that thread is a team that's playing at that high a level of defense. It looks like they have 8 players on the court and none of them are moving
Yeah.
because they're all just there. Like it's like they're not recovering to shut off offensive advantages. The offense is just not finding advantages anywhere.
Mhm. I was talking about Draymond, not just because his individual defense that is brutal, but also he's all the time and talking with his partners, and saying you have to move there. The other day he yelled at Steph and said because he missed a switch, and he yelled at him, and because of that yell, Steph steal a ball and passes to Draymond that make an assist, and Wiggins dunk.
Yeah, no, that's one of the questions I get asked a lot is if there was one piece of data that doesn't exist that you could have, what would it be?
Mhm.
And my answer is always audio. I like so no so because communication is such an important part of defense, to be able to understand which players are the best at that.
Mhm.
Who is using their voice, loudly, correctly, and early. Mark Gasol
Yeah.
was never an athletic marvel,
Nope.
but a he was expert at positioning himself. B was one of the great defensive communicators of the recent era. And so his teams were always playing good defense, in part because he not only saw where he had to be, he saw where Tony Allen had to be and where Zach Randolph had to be and where Mike Conley had to be. And he saw that early enough that he could tell them to go there. He could tell
Yeah.
them what offensive action was coming. And you can statistically right now, you can pick up on the effects of that in terms of,
Mhm.
hey, when he's on the floor, they play great defense.
Yeah.
But you can't like measure that directly. And so if we had some like a way to like audio that you could identify who's actually speaking and what they're saying. Now, that might not be for the faint of heart, given, if you've ever been close to the court in an NBA game, it's not suitable for work language used quite often, but but still, like to be able to know who's effectively like directing, who's coaching almost
Yeah.
on it from a defensive standpoint on the floor would be fascinating to me.
Marc Gasol, it was a kind of Arvidas Sabonis in this modern era. because but Sabonis, the father, it was because he only has one knee when he arrived to the NBA, but he managed to be great in those years in Portland. It was great seeing him in defense and also in offense, ordering or his partners.
Like, no, don't stand there. Stand right there. Okay, now I can pass it to you. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Angelito says, I think an interesting question in which Seth can give us a different point of view from the normal media opinion is what he thinks about Tyler Hero. What does he think will make him a more loved player in these advanced models?
So I think Tyler Hero is a player type that is a high degree of difficulty to be positively impactful. He's not necessarily a player who gives you a ton defensively. He he doesn't create a lot of easy shots for himself or others. Doesn't get to the free throw line a lot, but at least so far this year has been excellent making tough shots. Now, if he can be over this year, over his career, to be excellent making tough shots, that's a pretty good player. Like that's CJ McCollum, right?
Yeah,
That's that type of player. But going from very good at making those tough shots to average at making is the change from being a pretty good player to being a guy who might not be a rotation player. So that's the margin for error, at least with his current kind of the style of play, is very small. So that's I think that's really the sort of the statistical worry about Tyler Hero. Like if he's going to make every shot, then yes, he's good. Like
yeah.
that's that it's just there are players who, given the shots they're taking, you do wonder if that how long that can continue, or even if it does continue to some level, if it kind of regresses a little bit, and that takes him from an excellent player to a good player.
Mhm.
Um,
I think that he first has to establish like the sixth man in Miami, playing against second units and having such great games is he's having this year, and proving that he is this Tyler Hero and not last year's Tyler Hero.
Yeah, last year's Tyler Hero, like I talked earlier about if you can do analysis, and you understand that in a plus minus model, a player who is being played out of position will show up worse because he hasn't played as well. Doesn't mean he's a worse player necessarily. It just means he's and I think, like, for a lot of last year, like, first of all, he had some injuries last year, which is also a thing that can affect that. But
Mhm.
he was Miami tried to use him as like a point guard for a lot of last year, and for a guy entering his second year, that was an interesting experiment because if he can be the point guard, then that allows you to free spots up elsewhere to do other things, and would be very beneficial from a team building standpoint. That didn't really work out, and he's been sort of moved back to, because they added Kyle Lowry in large part. He's being able to move back to more of that, that, whether it's six man or as a starter, that kind of just go get buckets kind of role, which probably suits him better from a skill standpoint.
Mhm. We talked before about the Denver Nuggets. Canadian Chacho is here saying hello, and he's the huge fan of Denver Nuggets here in Spain. Um, what the stats say about a guy like Nikola Jokic? That I think that is absurd. Is I have no words for him. He's such a great player, and also is that kind of players that have something special that you can measure.
So the biggest thing about that like the thing that changed to take Jokic from like an all-star, borderline all MVP, all NBA level player to a MVP level player was he kind of always had the ability to be a high level scorer, and last season was the first year he almost got selfish enough to do that regularly. Like it kind of started in the playoffs in the bubble. And then it kind of carried through for all of last year. It's like, oh wait, not only am I going to be the best passer on the floor, I'm also going to be the best scorer on the floor, and I'll do that every night. And now I'm just the best player on the floor. And that I don't know if that's a, again, was that improved conditioning? Maybe a little. Was that a change in mindset? Perhaps. Was that, some form of skill growth in terms of his confidence in his jump shot? Perhaps. Like all of these things sort of work together. But whatever happened, it's like, okay, I'm a great passer, but I'm gonna score until you stop me. And then if as soon as you start to, bring help to me, then it's a layup because I'm not just the best passing big man of all time. I'm one of the, I don't know, pick a number, 5, 10, 15, however, like we'll just like one of a very small number of best passers of all time in the NBA.
We'll talk about your years in Milwaukee in a while. Also, we didn't talk about how much time we are going to do it. If you have to go, just say it, because I can be here like 5 hours. Canadian Chacho ask you if he says, if possible, what do you think about Michael Porter Jr. future? Denver take a big risk giving him a maximum contract. You have knowledge about Michael Porter Jr.
They took a big risk. Yeah, no, I think that's I thought they took too big a risk. I thought they if he had whatever year he was going to have this year, and we get to next summer and he's a restricted free agent and he ends up with the contract he got, it's fine. Doing it a year early, especially for a player with the health concerns of Michael Porter, I didn't love. And I on top of it, I'm probably lower and have consistently been lower on Michael Porter Jr. than a lot of people. To my mind, do we know he's good yet? I mean, we know he's good, but do we know he's good yet? Do you know what I mean? Like there's been flashes of him being really good, but
I'm not a Michael Porter Jr. guy. I think that there is no much material between his ears, and I think it's Manu Planetario talking. I think that that affects him on the court. I think he has a lot of talent, but we know a lot of players that had a lot of talent that didn't work out. I want to talk about your years in Milwaukee. I know that there is some issues that it's better not to talk names or something, but I want to talk about the experience of being in an executive of a team that it's I don't know how to say it. It's a kind of weirdo because we are in the super team era, and since the decision, everybody wants to be like LeBron James and match up with huge, great players and win now. But we saw in the years in Milwaukee a building process, and I think that's why the old school guys like me, we are really happy of the ring of the Bucks last year. How it was? Do you feel when you were there that this building process and all the things that were coming?
Whew. So that, like, what did you see coming? I got my first year with the team was like Giannis's first year as like an all-star level player.
Mm-hmm.
And did we know there was more growth there? Yes. Did we know this guy is going to be in the short list for best player in the league in 2 years? No. So that's, that, did we know we were going to especially, I'm like, really this question is almost hinges on how well do I think we were going to do? My last year was 2018-19, the year that we made the Eastern Conference Finals and lost to the Raptors, but won 60 games, I think, and Giannis won the MVP, and we had made a massive improvement. And so the question is almost, how much of that year did I see coming? I thought we'd be pretty good. I thought, you know what, we got better from last year. We added Brook Lopez on a very reasonable contract. He's gonna be a good fit for how we want to play. We have Chris Middleton's very good and underrated. We just traded for Eric Bledsoe, who was excellent defensive point guard for us and allowed us to play in transition, which benefited Giannis greatly. And we had some good depth around that as well. We'd signed Pat Connaughton to a minimum deal, which obviously has worked out very well. So I thought we'd be pretty good. And then about 3 games into the season, I remember texting some friends, and it's like, we might be good. Is what I text, like, because we sort of started the season. It's like, we might, like, you saw it come together, and it's just like, oh man, this is something here. We have something here, and that kind of carried through all year. I mean, I think the biggest sort of, in addition to Giannis becoming the MVP, like that was something that was maybe reasonably predictable. The big thing was like Brook Lopez being instantly an all defense level player for us. Yeah. Like we thought I can say, and I talk about this in the opening chapter of the book, like we knew we didn't know. We had a pretty good sense that he would be good for us and be solid defensively at very minimum. We did not know that he would become one of the elite rim protecting centers in the league and would turn us into one of the elite, not solely, but be the anchor of one of the elite defenses in the league. We thought we went into that season thinking, we're going to be a top 5 offense and maybe the 13th best defense. And that's a pretty good team. And then we got into that end, like, wow, we are elite on both ends. And that defense, like with Eric Bledsoe pressuring the ball, Brook Lopez defending the rim, and Giannis kind of running all over the place, being enormous. We're the best defense in the league too. And so that sort of coming together that way, especially on the defensive side, I think that's the part that surprised us more than we knew. We knew we were going to score the ball that year. But I don't think we knew before the year. I don't think we knew how good we were going to be defensively.
I think that Brook Lopez is very underrated in general in the league, and defensively specific. And we can see this year how much they are suffering without Brook. And I think it's great. Seeing also the change of a player, because we knew the Brook Lopez from the Nets from the beginning, that he nearly only dunks, and then we find this hell of defensive player and 3-shot menace also. It's I think he's very underrated in the league.
And then, I mean, a big part of the Bucks title run last year was actually getting back to a little bit of using him on the inside offensively as well. So excuse me, like, yes, he can stretch the floor and he can shoot the floor and then shoot threes, but he's also enormous and skilled. So in kind of the right matchups and situations, getting him the ball near the basket, and especially finishing off the Atlanta series when Giannis was out, like Brook was, like, I mean, literally and figuratively was enormous in terms of his offensive contributions. So I think he sort of indicates a weird thing that kind of happens in the NBA because of the nature of the salary cap. What you think of a player is necessarily like tied to their contract.
Hmm.
And he was overpaid for like the back little bit of the contract he had before he got to the Bucks. But it became easy to fall into the thing of, oh man, this player has a bad contract, and kind of shrink that in your mind to, this is a bad player.
Yeah.
It's like no, this is not a player we want to acquire because of the contract relative to his skill. It's not the same thing as he's a bad player. We got him for the biannual exception. Oh wait, this is a tremendous player. Like
Yeah.
it's the same guy, but and so that's the kind of thing that happens a lot. The other example I've been talking about this a lot. I've been using is like Jeff Green. When teams were trading first round picks for Jeff Green, it was like, oh man, Jeff Green. And now when teams are signing Jeff Green to like minimum contracts and not having to trade for him, he's like, hey, Jeff Green, yeah, he's a good, useful player. He helped the Nets a lot last year.
I think that it happens also. We talked about him before with Ricky Rubio. If he signs like a mid-level exception, I think he's a huge guy for even a contender. But with 18 million, that contract is maybe too heavy.
No, I think that's right. And you see that up and down the league, and just especially when a guy finishes that contract that was a bad one, like
Yeah.
what the evaluation of Andrew Wiggins will be on his next contract is kind of going to be the interesting one now, because he has been a good player for the Warriors. He has not been a max contract player for the Warriors, but he's
Yeah.
been a good player for the Warriors. And so
But
what sort of happens
but
when
I
he's
think
no longer? Yeah.
I don't know if it's right or not. I don't look at the numbers of how much are paid the players, unless I am in a bad team. Then yeah, I have to consider that thing. But I think that if you want to win, you have to be prepared to pay. So,
Yes.
what's the matter with the salary of Andrew Wiggins? If is he helping the Warriors to win? Yeah, and is Joe Lacob prepared to pay? Yeah, what's the matter?
So there's sort of two different questions there. Like, yes, like if being willing to pay sort of helps, it's an advantage. But it's also just from the mechanics of putting a team together. If like we kind of saw this a little when Stan Van Gundy was the general manager as well as the coach in Detroit.
Yeah.
He like identified the players that were maybe the right players, but to make sure he got the right players, he paid everyone like 2 million extra. And all of a sudden, like every year is like, man, if they just had one or two more guys, it's like, well, they could have one or two more guys, but they're spending 2 million extra on Reggie Jackson and 2 million extra on Aaron Baines and 2 million extra on, and all of a sudden, like, well, that's the money you would have used under the salary cap to be able to, have a seventh, eighth, ninth man who can play.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it comes in from just the mechanics standpoint of not wanting to. Another example, just to keep going with it, since this is kind of current, is um, part of the reason the Lakers trading for Russell Westbrook was bad, was to be able to actually bring his salary in. The only way they could do it was to trade Kyle Kuzma and trade. Okay, they didn't want Montrezl Harrell, that's fine, but to trade Kyle Kuzma, to trade Contavious Caldwell-Pope, these were valuable players for them, and then not be able to re-sign Alex Caruso, like that's those things have hurt the Lakers very much this year. Those things have helped the Wizards and Bulls a great deal this year.
Mhm.
And that's not just like Russ the player, but Russ also having a $44 million contract that if you're going to trade for him, you have to send out 30
Yeah.
some million in salary. And the guys making enough money to get to that probably don't suck. So
That's why I say that I look at the salaries if the team is not good. If the Lakers weren't in the Warriors position, we weren't talking about the 44 millions of Russell Westbrook. We will saying, oh yeah, great move. It's what LeBron needed and that. But it's like that. Seth, one last question.
sure.
Let me put your cover again. Here we have it. We have the mid-range theory. You can buy it in Amazon. But you also work now as advisor from the CEO of StatsBomb, that it's a company centered in soccer. How it was that change from basketball from soccer? Are you a soccer fan, or not?
I am a soccer fan. Part of the reason why I was brought on board as an advisor is StatsBomb. We StatsBomb are expanding into American sports, and since it's been primarily a UK based company, we're working primarily on American football right now, and
Mhm,
that's not a sport that's necessarily familiar to people from the rest of the world. Like they've probably seen it and
mhm.
watched it at times, but it's not nearly as part of the culture anywhere else as it is here. So that's um but to get back to your other question, yes, I'm a big soccer fan. I've been it's unfortunate to say right now, but I've been a Manchester United fan for 25 years. And it was pretty good for about 15 of those years, and the last
Yeah.
10 not so much. Um but no,
Mhm,
no, so and that came about just Ted Knutson, the CEO of StatsBomb, has been as we've been friends for a number of years, and sort of talked about when they decided to move into North American sports, maybe working together, and
mhm.
that's happened. So I'm doing some of that.
And we can read you. Also, we have a Twitter account in Spanish, StatsBomb S. Ahí tenéis la cuenta en castellano de StatsBomb. And we also read you in the Athletic, and I have to recommend again that you have to subscribe to the Athletic. I talk with a lot of your colleagues. You're great. Everyone, when I keep in touch with you, is like, okay, yes, I'll do it. It's great, and like John Krasinski and company. And
I would
it's
say the entire NBA roster is
Mhm.
like you like I don't think there's I don't think in terms of just the strength of people covering. I mean, Eric Name is my friend who is
Yeah,
my good friend who is the beat writer for the Bucks is fantastic. You mentioned John Krasinski, James Edwards covering the Pistons
Marcus Thompson.
is yeah
Um,
is phenomenal. Yeah, Marcus in obviously Marcus and Anthony Slater in Golden
yeah,
State. Like you go up and down across the league. We like those people are as plugged in and knowledgeable and just good writers as and you know and fun to work with. So
and you
um
do a great job talking about real issues, not only highlights and oh yeah, LeBron James is great, and or Luka Doncic, look at what he did. No, you talk about basketball. You talk about the issues around the different teams, and it's great. It's been a pleasure, Seth. And this is your house, so whenever you want, with the next book or something, and here you have
oh, now
your
you wait, you're assigning me homework of writing another book now. Can't I just enjoy this one a little bit?
Okay, so I was just looking for an excuse to having you here.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you very much, Seth. Ahí teníamos a Seth Partnow, ya sabéis su libro The Midrange Theory. Volvemos mañana por la mañana en NBAdictos a las 12. Un saludo.